Like millions around the world, India too was caught in World Cup fever.
The player that you will miss the most?
It occupied vast chunks of airtime on country's top news channels and found a lot of space in print too. But for the fact that India wasn't participating, the country joined the rest of the footballing world in celebrating what is arguably the greatest sporting event on the planet, happily cheering for their adopted teams from Europe or South America.
But every 4 years, after the biggest party in the world comes to an end, after the hysteria is over, pops up this question: when will the second most populous country in the world qualify for the FIFA World Cup?
It is an embarrassing question as a General Secretary, and I sometimes find it difficult to answer such a question. There's absolutely no reason we should be playing the World Cup.
Current state, it's unimaginable, because no serious efforts are being made. After every World Cup, this question gets raised, and people, especially when you compare with Ivory Coast and earlier when 2006 there was Togo and all, or even Costa Rica, which could fit into Delhi and reached a World Cup quarter-final. So it's the hurt sinks in even more, that if small countries can do it, who are economically weaker than us, if they can do it, why not us?
Great players I have met few, they do ask, why India can't produce 11 good players.
While it's safe to say that currently we don't have 11 good men needed to compete with the best in the world, but it's worth reminding the critics that Indian football wasn't always like that. Rewind to 1950, the first time the World Cup was played in Brazil, and India should have been there. But the country's puzzling withdrawal from the tournament is wrapped in mythology. One legend claims that FIFA didn't allow the Indian players to play bare feet. Whatever the reason, football experts believe it was a decision that changed the course of Indian football forever.
Golden opportunity. The biggest, Indian football would have soared. At least we would have had a name in the World Cup. This whole, what we face in every World Cup, when will India play, wouldn't have happened. We would have been there. Brazil desperately wanted us. They in fact kept that group open. Our group was Sweden, Paraguay, Italy. That remained a 3-team group, because right till the end FIFA and Brazil wanted us. So it was a major mistake. Of course, there were factors were that it was over a month-long journey by ship. The players were uncertain. But this is a myth about the barefoot, because the Hyderabad players, who would have been about 3-4, and the Bangalore players, who would have also been 3-4 in the team, all were comfortable with boots. The Hyderabad players only played with boots. So it wouldn't have been that disastrous. It was, yes, the Bengal-based players who were uncomfortable. We could have managed. It was a golden opportunity missed. And when Manna, who I talked to, was probably been the captain, late Shalyan Manna, who helped us win the gold medal in the 51 Asian Games, he said that the World Cup then and now was very different. He said we didn't even think, there was no television coverage, there was nothing on radio, there'd just be in the news that so-and-so won. And he says newspapers carried a couple of columns. So he says for us, the Olympics was more important. We wanted to be like the Indian hockey team who received a hero's welcome after 48. So he says we were under the misconception that if we played in the World Cup, we wouldn't be allowed to play in the 52 Helsinki Olympics. So he said at that era, most of us felt Olympics is more important than the World Cup. We'd be branded professionals. That was a big opportunity missed. FIFA was so angry with India not, fulfilling the obligation, that in fact they didn't accept India's entry for the next 2 or 3 World Cups. And I thought 62 was another good opportunity lost, because India was an outstanding team then. But the All India Football Federation never had the vision. That was the pity.
Had India played in the 1950 World Cup and subsequently the next few editions of the tournament, who knows where Indian football would be today. But instead of crying over spilt milk, let's try and assess how near, or rather how far India is from that elusive spot at the FIFA World Cup.
Only the 32 top teams of the world have the privilege of playing in football's premier event. The qualifying format is designed in such a way that there is representation from all parts of the world. So currently, FIFA rules allow the top 4 teams in Asia to participate in the World Cup. India currently ranked 151st in the FIFA ranking, but more importantly, they occupy the 27th spot in Asia, which still means they're miles away from the World Cup dream. So it was no surprise that during the qualifying for the 2014 World Cup, India failed to even reach the group stage, falling at the first hurdle to the United Arab Emirates, a country that boasts of less than 1% of India's population.
India is in that position when Japan was in 80s, I'll say, yeah, and therefore Japan played in the 90s the World Cup, yeah, so therefore it is the gap, though in ranking it looks huge, but in terms of real football aspect, if you see a comparison, India is a bit ahead, because what India has got is its tremendous youth population.
We are 20 odd in Asia right now. The first thing that should be in our mind is to get in the first 10 of Asia, which is not going to be easy, but that's a smaller target. The moment we think as a nation that we have to play a World Cup, which is a far distant dream and it's a true fact, you're going to bog yourself down as a nation and as a player. It's very, very important to take normal steps and then take it further. So we are in the third tier of Asia right now, and then the second tier consists of teams like UAE, Qatar, Uzbekistan, and the first tier of Japan, South Korea, Australia. So we really, to have any chance of having anything important in the world scenario, we have to first think of the first in Asia. And that should be the dream, right? And that should be the realistic challenge in front of us.
To move from third tier in Asia, where India are at the moment, to the top tier requires a lot of planning, time and money. While steps are being made to move in that direction, for the time being, India could explore a few other options, one of which is to get players of Indian origin to represent the country of their ancestors. Some may call it shortcut, but quite frankly, it's a strategy that is being used by various countries across the globe.
For example, all the 23 members of the Algerian team that played in Brazil were born in France and played all their junior level football in the country of their birth. Most members of the current Afghanistan team are residents of Europe and hone their skills by playing in B divisions of footballing powerhouses like Germany and Norway. No wonder then they are current SAF champions and also ranked higher than India in the FIFA rankings. Similarly, there are a bunch of Indian origin players plying their trade in leagues across Europe, like 23-year-old Harmeet Singh, who was born in Norway and plays in the country's Premier Football League. So what stops India from tapping into this talent, as has become the norm the world over?
Why not? People might say it's a shortcut, but why not in the interim? We want to try and make a better Indian national team, and so if we can take some shortcuts in the short term to bring those players in, why not?
USA is the prime example. 1994, I was there in those World Cups. Some of those players couldn't speak English. They'd been just taken off from various countries. So India also has a large NRI population. But is the government of India willing to, take those extreme steps?
Many of the countries, they are, following this path, yeah, and they are successful, like Afghanistan, most of the players, at least 50% of them, residing in Germany, USA, Norway, those parts, and they play and they've beaten India, and therefore we need not to go far to see this example.
But amongst FIFA's many eligibility criteria for representing a country at international competition, the first and the most basic one is that the player must hold the passport of the country he wishes to play for. Unfortunately, unlike most other countries, India doesn't offer dual citizenship to those that may be of Indian origin but hold a foreign passport.
If you're a European citizen, you were born in Europe, you have to give up your European passport and take an Indian passport. I think that is not really right, and I think the government should look to take a second look at this. I think it will make a significant difference if they become a little more open about this.
On one side, we can always think and search for all the Indian origin players who are playing in different leagues in Europe, in a better league, much more knowledgeable leagues and much more better level leagues than I-League. But on the other side, all the teams who do that, they don't have the same population that our country has. We can ask ourselves, do we need players from outside? Don't we have 1.3 billion people in our country?
How many times have you heard this? The second most populous country in the world, and yet we can't produce 20 world-class players? Well, some already have an excuse ready, saying football is a sport that's not suited physically for us Indians. The problem lies in our genetics. But in reality, nothing could be further away from the truth.
The most successful Asian teams at the Football World Cup have been Japan and South Korea, none of which boast of big-billed players. Why just Asia? Spain dominated international football for a decade with a team that didn't comprise of exceptionally tall players.
Spain is an example all the time. It's not a good example now. They got knocked out in the first round, but previously they were the World Cup champions. And a couple of players over 6 foot, maybe Casillas, maybe Puyol, Piqué, and the rest of them were under 6 foot. So it's a cop-out for me.
And why look too far? Arguably the best footballer in the world, Lionel Messi is all of 5 feet 6 inches. And the best example of size does not matter in football as long as one possesses good skills and speed. But then if one talks about Messi, then one also needs to acknowledge the contribution that Barcelona made in making Messi. A 13-year-old Messi who was suffering from growth deficiency was signed up by the Spanish club who trained him, paid for his treatment and made him the footballer he is today. So don't let anyone tell you that India doesn't have talented youngsters. That Indian football doesn't know how to groom their prodigies is where the real problem lies.
I want to ask you something. A young prodigy in India who is 12 and a young prodigy in England, let's suppose you're a young Rooney, what he gets after 12 to 20, is it the same that a kid gets from 12 to 20 in India? We've got to ask ourselves. Normal education about food, normal education about sleep is very, very important at a tender age. Once we attain that, we're definitely going to improve as a nation in football.
We talk about grassroots football, and if we got a 6-year-old from India and a 6-year-old from Argentina and a 6-year-old from Germany and a 6-year-old from Holland, there's no difference. It's the same. Grassroots football, 6 years old, they're all the same. They just go and play it and love football. But it's what happens between 6 and maybe 16, that's the big difference.
To improve the standard of any sport in a country, one first needs to popularize that sport in the region. And that's one problem that football does not face in India. It may not be the #1 sport, but it's extremely popular across the country. But it's not just about playing the sport, it's about playing the sport right. As Dutch legend Johan Cruyff once said, football is simple, but playing simple is tough.
Sadly, majority of schools get their physical education teacher to double up as their football coach, and those that do appoint specialist football coaches are not qualified enough and hence follow obsolete coaching methods. And remember, in football they say a bad coach is worse than no coach at all.
We're lacking in coach education as well. We're slowly changing things and it's slowly going to happen. But for example, we've got 2 active Indian instructors, AFC instructors, for a country of 1.2 billion people, and we've got 2 recognised and current available AFC instructors for India. I mean, that's crazy. We should have 200, we should have 500 instructors.
Lately, a lot of private soccer schools have mushroomed all across India, most of whom have famous European football clubs as partners and ensure the correct training methods are followed. But are those clubs here in India for economic reasons, looking beyond their own saturated markets? Or are they doing the job the AIFF never really did, that of introducing football to kids in a systematic manner? This is something that's still up for debate.
These various academies and these foreign clubs who come here encourage that because it helps them to sell their merchandise. So they may go for a summer in 2 weeks. Nobody learns football in 2 or 3 weeks. That is another myth that should be shattered. You can't learn a normal academic subject in 2-3 weeks. The most dynamic game in the world, nobody learns in 2-3 weeks. It's just a money-making gimmick.
AIFF on its part has finally woken up. It now has 3 fully residential academies based in Kolkata, Goa and Bangalore that have been opened with the sole purpose of grooming the youth teams. The responsibility of taking India to the next level will depend on how these youngsters perform on the international stage. And their first true test will come when India hosts the Under-17 World Cup in 3 years' time. The chance of hosting this event has been broadly received as a fillip for Indian soccer, with the potential of breathing new life into the local game. Not only will it give the youth team the necessary exposure of playing against the likes of Brazil and Germany, it will also be the first opportunity for AIFF to measure the success or failure of the youth development program.
India will be able to see how this under-17 team is going to perform, and if they able to compete with those top teams equally, or not conceding too many goals, and they are still competitive, the Indians will start believing that football has a future in India, and they will greatly come out and support this game.
After the Under-17 World Cup, we would, and we hope that we'll be able to host it successfully and satisfy FIFA. We would like to bid for the Under-20 World Cup in 2020. So these same boys actually will be the fulcrum for the Under-20 team. The Under-17 boys who go on to play the Under-20 World Cup, if we get it, or if we qualify for it, will obviously form the fulcrum of the national team going forward. And I think we would be I'm fairly optimistic that if that happens, we would be serious contenders in the world of football.
While the new grassroots program is a good start and promises a lot for the future, the All India Football Federation must also ensure that it does not repeat the same mistakes with the new crop like it did with the national teams of the past. So for starters, it needs to follow these couple of things if it wants to make that big leap forward.
The Indian football team is currently languishing at the 151st spot in the FIFA rankings. But is India really the 151st best team in the world? Not quite. A big reason for India to be so far back in the rankings is the lack of international matches, which allows a team to pick up points and eventually move up the rankings. A look at the data from the last 5 years tells just how few international games the Indian team has played in comparison to world's top teams like Germany and Argentina. In fact, why just top European and South American teams? Even if one compares India's total international games to Asian powerhouses like Japan and Korea, the difference is stark. Fewer international games means lack of competition, so no matter how much or how hard one trains, exposure to competition is the only way to improve the standard of a team. That Indian fans are well versed with the ins and outs of European leagues is a present-day reality. A 2014 study of football consumption in India by TAM Media Research listed football at number 3 of the most watched sports in India, after cricket and freestyle wrestling, at an audience of 83 million. Between 2005 and 2009, football viewership in India is set to have risen by a whopping 60%. But then the impact of overseas football within India has been a double-edged sword thus far.
My fear is, with going around the country and talking to players, is that it has created the word is too strong, but a type of cultural apartheid. There is, because of watching foreign football, consequently there is a type of disgust against Indian football. It's become worse. It's got accentuated over the years. The more you watch the UEFA Champions League and all, and when there are these young impressionable minds who often, yes, the game is brilliant, but it's often also the television which makes it so brilliant, which makes it even more brilliant than it actually is.
India's Premier Football League, on the other hand, has had more than one thing wrong with it. Not all matches are played on the weekend. Games, in fact, are played in the middle of the afternoon instead of the more convenient time in the evening. No wonder then that I-League games witness very, very poor crowd turnouts, and TV ratings too are negligible.
You take Spain or Italy or England, or you take Asian example as Japan, Korea, or Iran. So they all have better local leagues. So therefore, it is fundamental for India to strengthen I-League. And if you have a better league, the quality of the national team automatically improves.
I think it's high time that the sponsors, the federation and the I-League committee should sit together and think about making the I-League more lucrative.
Maybe the upcoming IPL-style football league, the Indian Super League, with its celebrity owners and international stars, may help bring crowds to the stadiums and generate interest in Indian football amongst the youngsters. But how much will it help nurture younger generations of footballing talent is still up for debate.
FIFA President Sepp Blatter, on his visit to India, called the country a sleeping giant of world football. 7 years on, and the giant is still sleeping. But remember, football is a game of two halves, and looking at the current state of Indian football, it's safe to say that it's at the half-time break after enduring a very poor first half. And if the signs are to be believed, expect India to score a few goals in the second half.
Golden moment for India to forge ahead. Is history repeating itself? Will the Indian skipper get another goal and give Indian fans all over the country great joy? And he scores! It is a historic day for Indian football. The crowd crowd on their feet, sheer jubilation. Golden moment for Indian football, like the 62 Asian Games in Jakarta 50 years ago.